I am so excited to introduce you today to Dr. Tammie Chang, board certified physician and author of Boundaries as a Woman Physician, the key to loving your life and career in medicine. And we're going to steal Tammie's advice in so many other areas. Thank you for joining us, Tammie.
Oh, thanks for having me today.
So excited. You're out in Seattle. I'm here in Arkansas. So we're
yes, far away.
yes. Which is, I was complaining about technology, but this is the beautiful part of technology is that we can do this together today. So
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So cool.
So bring us to your story, because as every good passion does, this has this story of obviously you started in medicine, but have been brought to this fine focus of boundaries and boundaries within medicine and women. And so bring us up to speed.
Oh, sure. The summary is that everything about what I do today and this book came out of the most difficult time in my own personal life, in my life and career, about 3 years ago as a physician. So I hit rock bottom at that time, very severe burnout. I was actually suicidal. And that's not something we talk about much in the medicine world in particular. There's a lot of stigma, I think, everywhere, but in particular, I think it's 100-fold in medicine. And I needed to take time off. I really need a lot of help. And so everything about my life has really honestly come out of that time. Anything I can do to help other women never get to anywhere close to that place, whether we're physicians or not. And so that's what this book is all about.
Yeah. So what did bring on such a harsh reality of that moment in your life?
Yeah, I'm on the younger side as a physician. I hope I'll be doing this for a really long time. And I was only about 5 years out of training at that point, so late 30s. And really, we were at a time which is not unlike what we're experiencing in the pandemic at this stage in healthcare, which is just severe staff shortages, the exhaustion of ongoing trauma. There really hasn't been much of a break, right, in the healthcare space. Honestly, for most of us in the pandemic, it's been just ongoing, right, in general, regardless of what industry we're in. Mm-hmm. And so at that time, I'm a pediatric oncologist. So it's already a sensitive and challenging field when it's at its best. I had my colleague who was a dear friend and our director, his own daughter was dying from metastatic breast cancer in her mid-20s. So it was very hard to watch our dear friend and colleague go through that. We also had another colleague with serious health issues as well. And then we were just short-staffed overall. And then we, at the same time, had record numbers of new cancer diagnoses in our patients, our pediatric our kids, right? And record numbers of relapses, deaths, all these things were happening. And it all converged in the same 6-month period of time. So I really was working. I was on call more than I had been probably ever during my training, wasn't getting sleep. I was working all the time, right? Not taking a break, taking it all on is my responsibility too. And I do think that looking back on that time, that is the key to why I got so low, is I did take on everything because I felt it was my responsibility to make sure everyone was okay. My colleagues were okay, our patients were okay. So it just hit the bottom. Is what happened.
Yes, my goodness. And so you exited the scene. Like, did you take a sabbatical when you kind of hit this low, or what did that look like?
I took a almost 3-month leave of absence, which in medicine is a very long time. But I wish, in many ways, I think that has been the most important 3 months of my life, was to step back and completely reevaluate everything. Because I really considered quitting medicine, of course, and not working anymore as a physician.
So fast forwarding to now, can you confidently say you're glad you didn't give up?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't be here doing this work. And I've discovered my why with a capital W for everything in my life and what I want the rest of my life to be about, which is empowering, especially women, to live in a way that really cares for us first and allow us to have that freedom in our lives that hasn't necessarily been modeled for us in our development and our growth and our training potentially, or all the years of school by the adults around us. And yet we can certainly create another path, and especially for the next generation. I want this for our kids and our daughters and their kids and just everything that comes after that.
Absolutely. And so medicine still exists, right? Are you still a practicing physician?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a pediatric oncologist half the time, and then I'm still employed full time with my organization. I'm the medical director of provider wellness, actually, for our large healthcare system. So it's my job to take care of our 4,000 physicians and APPs. So it's almost kind of amazing that I'm here doing this work, because I never would have considered it, and yet it's just such a deep passion, and then it's almost like everything has led to what I'm up to now.
Right. I can tell you're like, your soul is filled, that you've got this well-rounded view. The fact that you can do all of what you said you're doing and feel at peace, like you do have this figured out. And so we need your insight. I think this was interesting. You mentioned that understanding that to heal and serve others, one must first focus on having a healthy body, spirit, and mind. So maybe you could kind of walk us through how you really not only started that journey, but have come out on this side. Again, I keep saying confident, but I think a lot of people, when they're in where you were, it's hard to believe that hope story of like, I could actually get to that next point. And so walk us through that.
Yeah, it doesn't happen overnight. And this has been 3 years, and I'm still learning and growing and stretching, right, every single day. And I hope I will be for the rest of my life. That's my goal. Sure. So there is no end to this journey or the path, but it really starts with just that very first step. And it's that self-awareness and recognizing where we're at. And I honestly couldn't see that right at the time. And so and sometimes we need the other really loving people in our lives to just give us the brutal truth, right? The honesty about what's going on, because we often can't see it when we're in such a low spot. And when we're in such a low place, it's that much harder to even reach out to ask for help. Mm-hmm. Right. So it's not even getting to that point, but also allowing others to help us to lean on others and to be open to that when they reach out to try to help us, is starting there.
Okay. So yes, if we were kind of ordering these steps of I'm feeling burnout, whatever level of that spectrum it looks like, first step is to start asking for help.
Well, to even accept help. Someone might even, because that's actually a lot of what I do in my provider wellness job. I coach and support physician APPs, but most don't even ask for help. You have to keep offering it and offering and offering it to them. And eventually they might, when they're ready. I actually had many people trying to offer help along the way, but I couldn't hear them, right? I wasn't able to be open to it. So I think it actually starts with being willing to accept help.
And again, like, how does that change at some point, that you finally force yourself to accept it and then start to see some benefit in it? Or were you forced to accept it? Like how does one make that change?
Yeah. And it's when we hit the rock bottom that's sometimes one of the few times we're willing to finally make a change. And wouldn't it be incredible if we could not ever get to that point? So, great. Right. And so it's building that self-awareness of, where am I at today? Where am I at? And where have I been in the last few days? How am I doing at this moment? And am I okay right now? Right. And I think when we slow down enough, and I know you're such a huge advocate of our taking care of ourselves, right? And it's that, am I okay right now today? Because it goes up and down even throughout the day. And I struggle with it now too. I think it's an ongoing challenge and on self-awareness of, really, how am I? Am I okay? Do I need to change something right now or today?
Right. So a daily check-in, so smart. I'm picturing and transferring this right over into mom world, and how many times a spouse has to offer help, or I just feel like there's so many instances that transfer into why women kind of keep chugging along, keep plugging on, and somebody can offer it and you can be like, no, it's fine, I've got it. Maybe because we don't feel like somebody can do it how we can do it, or we don't want to be viewed as weak. Or what are some of your trainings on all of those mentalities, of like, what if somebody does feel like it's weak to take help, or they have like a perfectionism type personality where nobody else can do it like they can do it?
That is a very common theme. I think that was also me too. And I think it comes down to, honestly, how we're socialized and raised as women. And it's not anyone's fault. It's how things have been, and we are evolving and changing, and it is getting better, but it takes a long time, right? I think back to this concept of boundaries, which didn't exist until the 1980s. So our parents definitely weren't exposed to that growing up. I also have immigrant parents, so they definitely had no concept of what that is, right? We've got all the cultural stuff too. And then being female, right? And then this is how our mothers thought they had to act and do everything for everyone in the home. And that was their worth as a mother or a woman or whatever, or a wife. And then that translates to how we interact and do things right in our daily life too. And so when I talk about this concept of boundaries with women in particular, it's it can be a really charged or very extremely uncomfortable topic, because it gets so down to what's so ingrained in us since we were little girls of being a good girl, being a helper. I was always told girls are always nice and helpful was kind of the mantra. And there has to be a limit to that, because we can't always be helpful and leave nothing left for us. And oh my gosh, especially for moms, right? I mean, we're taking care of everyone. There's all this stuff going on all around us all the time.
Yeah, and I think that you see it in moms and you see it transfer into grandmas. Like, I think a lot of times women feel like, well, when I hit that next phase, then and it doesn't go away. It just comes with its own new set of challenges. And sometimes even harder, because now you might be caretaking and you might have kids that you're watching after, and you might have your job. Like, talk about kind of all the different hats that somebody might be wearing or buckets that they might be needing to fill, and just some advice around finding some peace in that or setting the boundaries.
Yeah, I think it has to start, everything has to come from us, like as in from the inside, from a place of that peace and that strength. I think, and that's what I so believe in, whether we're talking about boundaries or we're talking about leadership or being a mother or being a physician, all these things, all these different roles, that it has to come down to really deep inside what are our non-negotiables as a human being, regardless of our gender, really. And so what are those core values? Are we living by them? Are we honoring them by whatever we do in our lives? And are we prioritizing ourselves? Because that is a new concept for a lot of us as we become adults.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that you could give us some samples of when you say core values, just to get listeners' heads spinning around like, oh, yeah, I get how to do this?
Yeah, it was actually a new concept to me only 3-4 years ago, until I read Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead. Have you read some of her books? And
right.
Yes. I love her stuff. Yeah. So it's essentially what is a core part of who you are. An example would be, when do you feel just freaking mad, right? And you don't know why. Like something just really pushes you and you're just angry and pissed and you don't know what it is about the situation or whatever this person's saying or whatever that really is just like fire, like there's a fire that goes off, right? And you don't know, you're like, why am I reacting like this? That's a clue that there could be a value that's not being honored in there. And then another one one of my favorite exercises as a coach is to do the peak experience exercise. So for instance, if you think back on your entire life till now, to this day, right, 2022, what are the peak moments in your life? What stands out to you? That's a question I ask, because there often are values hidden in there. It's when you felt most alive, most aligned with who you really are, without trying to please anyone or be anyone else, or what you think society wants you to be, or who your parents thought you should be, or your culture, or your country, or your gender even, right? And or anything. It's really you. And so what are the themes that run between those peak experiences? Most people can name a couple, right? 2 or 3. And to me, when I think about it, I can think of 3. My 3 peak experiences. And the running theme for me in each of those was there was absolute joy. There's just abandon, freedom, carefreeness, full of love. I was with people. I was alive, dancing, outdoors. It's all, for me, it's about the outdoors. It's movement, it's dancing, it's backpacking, it's hiking, it's being active, it's being with the people I love most, and just being me and joyful without trying to pretend to be anything else. So when I think about my top core values are joy, love, freedom, and then courageous integrity is my 4th one. And empowerment is my 5th one. And growth is my 6th one. And so I know that when I'm not honoring those things, I don't feel right. Something is off. So it becomes a really important litmus test or a way to approach anything, which is a situation, a difficult or even easy decision, simple decision. But if we look through everything through the lens of those values, it actually makes everything so much easier. And that includes boundaries.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And even just hearing you talk about this, I'm like, if we don't have those labeled, we're missing this whole guiding light that it is hard. Like we can hear we're not in line with our integrity, and there's a feeling that goes along with it.
Yeah.
But you mentioning to name the core values really shines a light on like, oh, you can see where you're not aligning. And if you can see it, then it's probably more tangible to be able to fix it, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to be aware of it first. I actually have mine right there next to my computer all the time. And that's so I try to live by that. Of course, I fail all the time, but I try.
You're human. We're human.
We're
listeners.
Completely human. Absolutely. I mean, we're all work in progress. And I often share, we teach what we most need to learn. Right. And this is why I'm so passionate about boundaries, because I so needed to learn it, and I still work on it every single day today.
And then when we do teach it, it means that it's front of mind every day. That's really helpful.
That's true. Yeah, right. Right. we have to live what we try to teach, because it's hard. Yeah.
Back to your point too, I don't want to skip over this because I believe strongly in expectations and like setting appropriate expectations. And to your point of, I do fail. Don't you just think that we just need to expect that, like expect it, and then it won't feel so hard when it happens.
I almost wonder if we should remove the word fail from our language and the way we speak, because it's not really failing. It's just learning.
Right. And so my guess is, especially since your finer focus is like more physician bound and female, even, you probably work with a lot of individuals who struggle with any part of that word of failure, or even not. So take us through, because I don't know, I just feel like keep taking us through examples of hope stories of somebody that's kind of been even where you were and how they got out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually partly how I wrote the book that I am coming out with, because I gave examples. I essentially did a case study of 3 different women and how they evolved by implementing some of these strategies. Obviously, none of us are perfect. I think that word should also be removed. Perfect should be removed, and fail. Right?
Agreed. Done. Let's do it. It doesn't
exist. Like balance. I don't think balance truly exists either. That's another word. But yeah, right. Yeah. No, but that's partly why. Because then my hope is that then people reading the stories can see a little bit of themselves, even if it's not their story, right? But they go, oh, I can relate to, oh yeah. And honestly, it's based on not only my life, but an amalgamation of, I work with all these women, right? And it's kind of their own stories. So one example would be, this is relevant in the women physician space, but I think it's probably relevant in any professional women's space. But one of the largest pain points for women physicians, or just physicians in general, is the charting we have to do, which is write the patient encounter notes, all the paperwork. So if you think of any job that involves paperwork, there's always paperwork. And that can often be the least pleasant part of sometimes can be the least pleasant part of our job, depending on what you like about your job. Right. And that often, it actually really is the largest pain point for a lot of women and a lot of physicians, and they struggle to actually get it done. It kind of takes over their life. So they often will take all the work home at night, continue to chart late at night, still be behind, go back to work, still be behind, right? You hear this, it's kind of like this monkey on the back that never goes away. And they always feel like there's this work that hasn't been done, because it's not done. And they're doing it on the weekends. I know of a lot of women who take it with them, like take vacation time just to finish their charting. I mean, it's not awful, right? So it's like any work. Another example would be any work that we just don't ever stop and take a break from, right? And then it absolutely wears on us and drains our energy completely, so that we don't have that energy to do other things. So we're we're there. So we set some ground rules. Like a boundary could even be essentially you only limit the amount of time you spend doing that stuff to certain parts of the day. So we start putting some guardrails on it. That's a practical tip, which is I have women, if they work in an 8 to 5 kind of job, clinical job, then I'll have them do charting or some of that work during specific times throughout that day. So that also could be email. Email is another pain point for a lot of people. I try to really get people to limit that to 2 to 3 times max a day. And then you don't touch it. You don't look at it at night. You set a hard boundary there. That's another example.
I'm loving guardrails as a nice buzzword to take with us today. Kind of use guardrails in just a more everyday standard of life too. And emails, actually, all of this actually transfers over, maybe not the charting, but just like those tasks that keep creeping in and never stop. So emails, what's another area you see that for women?
Social media can do that too. I struggle with that. And a lot of it too is we have these devices now, right, that are at our fingertips. And so we can set rules for ourselves so that we're not encroaching on meaningful time with family or for ourselves, but we have to choose it. So then again, I like to think through all these examples and go back to those core values again. So how are we honoring ourselves by choosing to do X, Y, or Z right now, and what it's doing to our life? Like the email, for instance, the monkey on the back, nonstop.
Right.
Being available all the time is really, I think, another struggle we have, especially now that the electronic world is amazing, but then people know we're working from home or virtually, and they're like, oh, well, they're home, so they're always available. So that includes text messages, phone calls, emails, all these things that take our time and energy, and that ultimately, if we're never off, we're not recharging. We're not disconnecting.
Right. I would love to hear some communicate. Okay, so this is my example. I feel like my family and friends know I'm terrible at responding right away or calling right back, and they're going to listen to this episode and be like, but sometimes it's intentional because right. If you respond, like you're saying, if you respond right away or you're calling right away, you're never off. Like I chunk it into times where my kids aren't with me or car line or whatever like that. So it's by accident, I have created an expectation of how others already know about me. So that's not like a big shock when Lindsay doesn't call you.
Yeah.
To the person who has been the opposite, who is always on, and like the second that person doesn't respond would maybe to another person be like, oh, they're mad at me, or that. How do you start creating those boundaries without feeling offensive, or I don't know, to just like let it settle well with your soul?
Oh, yeah. Because when we talk about boundaries, typically it's someone else is involved. There's another person, right? And then we have that relationship, the connection with that person, and then the history of how we've interacted. So what I try to do, if I try to help other women, depending on the relationship with that person, you can let them know. I mean, the best is clear is kind, right? The best is to be clear and just be honest. Honesty and clarity. I'm really trying to make some changes in my life. I know that this might mean some changes in how I interact or how quickly I respond to things, because I'm really trying to be intentional about focusing on me and my family, or being with my loved ones, or being more present, whatever it is that's most aligned to you and your core values. And then explain, this might mean that I might respond a little bit slower in the future, right? Rather than just like ghosting, cold, not responding. I mean, that you can do that if someone's really pushing you and not being kind, right? But hopefully you're also putting a boundary on people like that in your life anyways, because they're clearly not serving you in your life. So maybe, I don't know, how does that sound to you?
Oh, so good. I just had somebody on talk about Get Off My Bus. She wrote a book called Get Off My Bus, and where people get to like sit on your bus. Do they need to move to the back? Do they need to get off? But that's what I'm picturing with this boundary talk too. But clear is kind. Let's go back to that and just highlight it for a second, because this means even if it's a little uncomfortable, like communication has to happen. I'm a natural, like, what I would like to do, ostrich head in the sand type of a thing with a lot of things. I don't.
My natural state, I think.
I don't, but I'd like to. Same with you, So like, if we know communication is key, What are some of your ways of helping women who like they just want to crawl under the table when they hear us say you've got to communicate?
One thing to think about is that when we ask someone else for help, especially when it's a woman, they kind of instinctively want to help. So a way to frame it is, would you be willing to help, or could you help me in this effort that I'm trying to do in my life? Right? Or phrasing it using that, would you help me, or could you help me? Would you be willing to help me? Set this intention in my life so that I can be okay. And in the process, I'd love for it to help you too. You know, it may or may not be appropriate for the situation, but out of kindness and love and compassion, each interaction. Because the reality is when we're setting these boundaries, we're also modeling them for others and helping them to also set important boundaries, which they probably are struggling with in their lives too. Because it's not something was part of our upbringing for most of us as adults.
Right. No, that's so good. And I think that helps everybody. Again, from like a parenting standpoint, anytime that we can lump our kids in as like seeing something or getting to role model for them definitely bumps up on the priority list. And then again, just knowing that we're affecting eyeballs are on us all the time. So that we can be a positive for other people.
For others. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's such a good point. Man, why are boundaries are, and to your point, I know it's generational, and I know that we're going to see it even in our kids or their kids more than we'll be able to see it in ourselves. But it's tough. So there's no magic wand, is what you're saying.
There is no magic wand, and that's okay. What's the fun if there's a magic wand? Well, I don't know. I feel like it's like it feels so much more meaningful when there's been a little bit of work and a little bit of struggle right along the way. I mean, that's what I forget what conversation it was. Podcast I was listening to, but they were talking about there was some sacrifice and some struggle in there, but that made it all that much more worth it, right?
I can see that. I can definitely see that. Yes. Yeah. Let's talk about your book.
It's really to help women physicians. I mean, it's about women physicians, but I really hope it'll be helpful and meaningful for all women, period. And honestly, men too, and all genders. So hopefully there's lessons for everyone that are useful.
And when somebody grabs your book, what's like your hope and the way that they're going to utilize it?
I really hope they'll use it as a roadmap for how to begin to start this whole topic, because I think that's what's so overwhelming is when we think about, oh my gosh, how am I going to do all this stuff? You just have to pick one baby step. Right. And I intentionally broke it down into actionable baby steps with like reflection exercises and workbooks and stuff like that, so that it could be not so overwhelming. My goal is I just want it to be clear, concise, simple, loving, and you use whatever part is most meaningful and useful for you at that time in your life. Right. There's going to be stuff that works for others and not for others. So I just hope that there's something in there for everyone and that it'll help in some way.
Keep reading because, like you said, it will speak to you at different seasons of your life, depending on what you need from it at that moment.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it needs to live on our shelf, and grab often.
I'm learning exactly. And that was part of the joy of putting this together was breaking it down for myself. How did I do it all? Because I really have changed dramatically in 3 years, right? And what wisdom can I impart to others that could help them to really treat themselves with the same compassion that they treat others? That's really the summary.
Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. What am I not asking you, Tammie, that I could or should be?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I think the most important thing in my life are my husband and my fur babies. I mean, that's really all that really matters. No, a lot of things matter, but when you come down, if you really had to ask me what's the most important thing in my life, it's my golden retrievers, my cats, and my husband. So I don't have human children, so they're my children.
And then the ability to like come home and have the like time and energy that you want for those most important people in your life. So they're not getting, we always call it the fuzzy end of the lollipop. It was in a movie one time and I loved it.
I don't think I've heard that before.
Yeah. Oh, I will literally tell my husband, like, I feel like I keep getting the fuzzy end of the lollipop with you. And that's when we know we need to like recalibrate, make sure everything's back in order.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, that's what I want for everyone, right? That's really all I want is to be able to to have the full part of the lollipop at home, not the soggy part at the bottom. That's all that's left. It's like it's already gone. Someone else.
You're going to smile at that now. You're going to use that.
I love that. Oh yeah. Well, I will have to give you credit clearly because I'm like I did not think of that one.
I think we have to give. I think it was what All Dogs Go to Heaven. It was like some Disney movie,
which I couldn't watch because it makes me so sad.
So sad.
I can't handle dog movies. They always kill the dogs. They always die, and I can't handle it.
Oh my gosh. My daughter always wants to watch. It's with the dog that like
has that has multiple lives and it's the same dog.
Keeps dying. And I mean, I comes back a Hy-Vee mess. Yeah. I was like, never again. I like woke up sad. I went to bed sad.
That's no good. Yeah, we don't want that. But it is mean. I mean, it shows that it touches a part of our hearts, right? In another way. Right.
Yeah. Too much. Okay. You have to send our listeners off with this one bit. If you could wrap your arms around them, like, what do you hope and pray that they hear out of you today?
I want you to give yourself the same love you give to others. I just want you to be kind and compassionate to your own self. Because I know that your listeners are caring, loving, good people and want the best for others. And I just want that for you.
That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you for your time and your expertise today. We really appreciate you.
I loved talking with you today. Thank you.